A woman from Singapore has been deported from Australia for overstaying her visa and facilitating illegal prostitution.
When two superpowers clash, the first top-level US-China talks under President Joe Biden get off to a rocky start.
And almost 1 year on from the circuit breaker, we want to know, how did it change your life? Do let us know. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. 15 new COVID-19 cases confirmed today, all imported.
They were placed on stay-home notices when they arrived in Singapore. The Health Ministry will share more details tonight.
You know, Olivia, it's almost a year since Singapore went into the circuit breaker on April 7th, and our lives haven't been the same since.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, some started exercising, not me though, so picked up a new hobby as well, or learned a new skill, or maybe you switched jobs or even started your own business.
We want to know your story, so share it with us by completing the sentence, "Circuit breaker changed my..." with a word or phrase. Now you can email a photo or drawing together with a short description of your experience to stshare@sph.com.sg. The deadline is next Friday, March 26th.
Or you can share your photo or video on Instagram with a caption describing how your life has changed in the past year. Remember to tag it with hashtag #CircuitBreaker1YearOn. We look forward to hearing from you.
Now here's the story of senior staff nurse Nadia Erniyanti Maliki, who lost 15 kilograms since the circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker has changed my perspective on my health and my exercise regime. What has changed for me was my weight loss, as well as my fitness journey. I've been doing more regular runs, hiking, as well as going to the gym every week. My diet has also changed from having mindless eating, as well as going for frequent desserts, to going to a low-carb diet, as well as cutting down on my sugary stuff, such as sweet drinks, as well as my favourite desserts.
Meanwhile, a 58-year-old Singaporean man was charged today with making false declarations in his travel history, so he didn't have to serve his stay-home notice in a dedicated facility. He had also falsely declared that he would be occupying his place of residence alone or with household members with the same travel history as him. The man returns to court on April 9th.
In other news, a woman from Singapore living in Brisbane has been deported for overstaying her student visa. She had also been found guilty for engaging in prostitution and knowingly participating in the provision of the service by another. The Australian Border Force didn't name the woman and did not say where she was sent to. She was detained on February the 25th and removed on March 11th.
During a meeting of ASEAN's military chiefs yesterday, Singapore Defence Chief Lieutenant General Melvin Ong expressed grave concern over the situation in Myanmar. This was shared by other leaders. Myanmar's military chief Min Aung Hlaing also attended the meeting.
8 protesters in Myanmar were killed in the central town of Ong Ban today. This as Myanmar security forces opened fire during a confrontation.
Meanwhile, protesters are looking for and sharing information on incendiary devices like pressure cooker bombs and other weapons like slingshots. Molotov cocktails have also been spotted on the streets.
One thing is clear, many people no longer entertain the idea of a power-sharing arrangement between civilian politicians and the military. They want the latter out.
For the latest, let's check in with the Straits Times' Indochina Bureau Chief Tan Hui Yi. Hi Hui Yi, welcome back. There are pictures showing protesters using Molotov cocktails and other incendiary devices against the junta. This seems to indicate that the protests aren't as peaceful as they were in the immediate days following the February 1st coup. Is there a shift in the mood among the protesters? What are you hearing, Hui Yi?
Yes, we've been seeing some petrol bombs, some slingshots, and what appears to be
fireworks being used in the streets. People have been sharing information on homemade weapons online, though it's not clear that everybody's rushing to arm themselves. There are still peaceful protests taking place, and people are still marching and holding up banners or staging sit-ins. But the numbers on the streets are far smaller compared to before, because police and soldiers are deploying lethal force. We have seen a disturbingly high number of people killed by shots to their heads or necks, which very likely means that snipers were deployed. Security forces have also shot at hospitals that were treating the injured people. So there is a growing sense among protesters that they need to find some way to protect themselves. Now, any instance of armed confrontation will likely be very lopsided. We are talking about homemade weapons versus sophisticated arms imported from countries like China and Russia. It's something that the military can very easily crush. What's more perceptible is that the public is increasingly unwilling to consider any form of negotiation with the junta. Given the kind of violence that they have experienced, many are not open to the idea of returning to the kind of power-sharing arrangement that we had before the coup. They simply want to topple the military.
Right. Well, Hui Yi, some 200 protesters dead, with clashes between protesters and the military growing more violent each day. Is Myanmar on the edge of complete chaos? Is the country actually there already? And what will it take for the country to come back from the brink?
Well, there were incredible scenes coming out of Yangon's industrial zone on Sunday. Scenes that made it look like a war zone. But these images tend to be amplified on social media. My sources who drove through central Yangon yesterday mentioned that cars were traveling normally on major roads, though there were very few pedestrians. What's more insidious is the quiet devastation taking hold in Myanmar society and economy. We have now reached a point where police and soldiers break down the doors to people's homes for any reason. They remove their valuables. They destroy parked cars to intimidate people. They detain people in undisclosed places. They force people at gunpoint to perform free labor. And when they shoot people dead, their families have no recourse. Meanwhile, strikes have paralyzed the banking sector, the logistics network, and imports and exports. So prices of basic commodities are rising. And the shutdown of mobile internet services that we saw since Monday has made it impossible for many businesses to function. What we are seeing right now is an entire country coming to a standstill. So it's vital now for countries with substantial influence and reach in Myanmar, like China and Japan, to work with ASEAN to try to bring the key stakeholders together to reach a resolution.
Right. Well, as always, thank you for the update, Hui Yi. That was our Indo-China Bureau Chief, Tan Hui Yi. The Big Story will continue to track developments in Myanmar, and you can visit straitstimes.com as well for more updates.
Things got downright frosty in Alaska during the first high-level talks between the US and China since President Joe Biden took office.
The first day of talks quickly descended into bickering, each side sharply criticizing the other over human rights, trade and international alliances.
We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability.
Well, you can't blame this problem on somebody else.
I have to tell you, what I'm hearing is very different from what you described. I'm hearing deep satisfaction that the United States is back, that we're re-engaged with our allies and partners. I'm also hearing deep concern about some of the actions your government is taking.
我们把你们想得太好了，我们认为你们会遵守基本的外交礼节。
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols.
所以我们刚才必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
China correspondent Denson Cheong joins us from Beijing to take this discussion further. Denson, what was China hoping to achieve from the meeting, and can these targets still be met given yesterday's public acrimony?
I think Beijing had high hopes. When Biden was going to take office, I think there was some expectation that there could be a reset in relations. And I think when news of the Anchorage meeting first broke, there was some indication, or at least Beijing has been sending some indication that it desired, some kind of reset to set a kind of floor, so relations will not be able to deteriorate further. And of course, I think another thing that Beijing was keen on trying to get some progress on was whether to get some of the sanctions or the tariffs that were put in place by the Trump administration lifted. But of course, from what we saw this morning, it's been quite chilly in Anchorage in terms of the atmosphere. The Chinese side saying that there was no way for the American to treat guests. So I don't think that substantial that will come out now. I think going into the discussions, there were widely sort of varying expectations from the meeting. The Chinese sort of framed it as a high-level kind of strategic dialogue, which has the implications that this was just the start of a series of engagements, whereas the Americans sort of looked at it as like a one-off kind of deal.
Mr. Biden has been in office for just under 2 months, so still early days. But how would you describe current China-US relations compared with the ties China had with the Trump administration?
I think if you look at US-China ties now and compare them to what has been during the Trump administration, I don't think sort of anything materially has changed. If you look at Trump's some of the sanctions and the policies that Trump has put in place, basically nothing has been reversed. And I think if you look at some of the comments that Biden's officials have made, they've pressed China on issues like Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and I think materially they've sort of presented a far more firm, aggressive stance than I think some in Beijing would have hoped to see. So, right now, I think the Biden administration is still in the process of sort of reviewing some of these policies that Trump has put in place. And I think it remains to be seen whether or not things will substantially change. But my guess is that the likelihood of things dramatically changing is very low.
Well, thanks for the input, Denson. We've been speaking with Denson Cheong, China correspondent for the Straits Times. Elsewhere, in a bid to revive its tourism sector, Thailand will reduce the mandatory quarantine period for travellers from 2 weeks to 10 days. This will take effect from April 1st. Officials also said the country may stop enforcing quarantine altogether from October 1st, but a government panel delayed the decision on a 7-day isolation period for vaccinated travellers.
Alexei McCammond is out as editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue even before officially starting. The 27-year-old, who was supposed to start the job next week, stepped down from the position following backlash for past racist tweets. In a tweet from 2011, when she was a teenager, Ms. McCammond wrote, "Now Googling how to not wake up with swollen Asian eyes." In another, she wrote, "Outdone by Asian."
So, it's World Sleep Day today, intended as a celebration of sleep as well as a call to action on important issues related to sleep.
So I have to ask you, Jan, how many hours of sleep do you get each night?
I try to get about 6-7 hours, so I tend to usually go to bed at say about 11 and I wake up at about 6.
Right.
Yeah.
I get about the same same number of hours, 6 to 7 hours, and that's really bad according to this graphic here by the Sleep Foundation. Have a look.
Oh, so as a rule of thumb, the Sleep Foundation recommends an adult get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah, so we are definitely below what we're supposed to get.
Yeah.
Well, there are several ways to help you sleep better, like having a relaxing pre-bedtime routine, not eating too late, of course, but the most crucial for me is to force myself to put down the phone.
I think that is something that a lot of people can relate to, actually.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I do that as well. But more importantly,
phone all the time,
on the
and then-
phone, exactly.
yeah.
But more importantly, Olivia, because today is World Sleep Day, why are we still working?
You got me?
So I am suggesting to the SPH HR that we have a day off on World Sleep Day.
I second that.
I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Kue. So we'll see you next week on The Big Story. Sleep well tonight. Oh, your blanket.
Good night.